I'm pleased to be here in Wellington, New Zealand at the New Zealand Taxpayers Union with Jordan Williams. Jordan, how are you?
I'm very well.
Thank you for meeting with me today. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and the Taxpayers Union?
We're a taxpayer advocacy group with the mission of lower taxes, less waste, more transparency across both central and local government here in New Zealand. We're nearly 5 years old. We've got about 35,000 members and supporters across our two channels. We've got the national organisation, we're here in Wellington at our office here, and we've also got a spin-off group in Auckland, which is our largest city, focused at Auckland Council, the local provincial government. So we have this radical idea that you spend your money as a taxpayer better than politicians and bureaucrats. And so we, no matter the colour of the government, we are there to hold the government to account in terms of its spending decisions.
And did you create the organisation?
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders. David Farrer, who's got one of the leading blogs in New Zealand, kiwiblog.co.nz, is my co-founder as well, but I run the day-to-day operations.
Nice. And where does the funding come from for the union?
So we're funded by members and supporters. We've got, I mentioned 35,000 supporters,
That's impressive.
Of which in the last 12 months about 2,000 have contributed to the cause. So we're about 50% funded by people giving between 1,000 and 10,000 a year, or our sort of large donors. 25% by people giving less than 1,000, that's mostly online, and then we're 25% corporate.
Right. And you know, I was at the Hillary Clinton event in Auckland just the other day, and in researching your organization, I found an article that was in the New Zealand Herald in January of 2017, where you guys denounced was it a 7.7 million payment?
Yeah, so it's about 8 million so far. The New Zealand government, as part of NZ Aid, or our aid budget, have provided to, it's called the Clinton Health Initiative. It's a spin-off or sister organisation of the controversial Clinton Foundation. But we've, as a result of Hillary Clinton being in New Zealand, we've also gone out this week and pointed out that despite the change of government, we've gone from a
John Key, of course.
From John Key to a new centre-left or a Labour Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. We hoped that the change of government would mean that this funding was stopped, but in fact they're planning on giving another $5.5 million New Zealand dollars. I think that would be about 3.5 million American to the same foundation.
And it's quite a substantial sum. I was shocked to see that virtually no one at the Hillary Clinton event in the Spark Arena was aware of your organization or this payment to the Clinton Health Access Initiative. And I definitely wanted to raise awareness among New Zealanders and also to meet with you because, you know, I'm involved with a financial fraud investigator named Charles Ortel, and we do a regular show called Sunday with Charles that I hope you guys will start watching, because I think it's going to help you even understand in greater depth that the Clinton Health Access Initiative, CHI, and the Clinton HIV AIDS Initiative are just two examples of the vast fraud being committed regularly by the Clinton Foundation and its various offshoots. And the fact that those names are so similar and the acronym virtually the same is just one of the ways that money has been laundered, and tracking these payments and these funds has been really obfuscated around the world. So I think the work that you guys are doing is extremely important just in raising awareness among the people here in New Zealand.
Well, I think it's a couple of things there. I mean, we're not an experts, and I don't want to take any position in terms of whether fraud has occurred in these organisations. We're obviously aware of the FBI investigations and the like, but I mean, our concern is actually a little bit different, and it's a bit more fundamental than that. Is that aid money should be used, we pay our taxes, the government appropriates aid money to help the world's poor.
Yes.
Now what is actually happening is that is being muddied, it going into an organisation for partly aid reasons, and there's a lot of debate online as to the extent of the good that these various organisations do, but even if you accept that, the point is giving it to these organisations, we argue, is totally inappropriate because it's a clouded purpose. It's sort of semi-political, diplomatic
Right.
And semi sort of about aid. Well, no, it should be purely about aid, and that's really our key members' concerns. This has been a very popular campaign for us. I'm surprised to hear that, well, of course, people naturally going to the Clinton event probably be big fans, so that's
a little bit of tunnel
sense.
vision
yeah,
over there.
maybe. But, I mean, we have struggled a little bit to get this up into mainstream media in New Zealand, but nevertheless, it has still been an incredibly popular campaign. So we've, in the last 3 days, for example, we've had 2,500 people sign a petition against this funding, this funding. It's now up to nearly 6,000 signatures. And in addition to that, we've had nearly 2,000 people use our website, taxpayers.org.nz, and email our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters, the Deputy Prime Minister, who's responsible for this portfolio, and say, just stop this funding.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need it anymore. The Australians that New Zealand does like to compare ourselves to constantly, you know, the relationships like Canada and the US sort of thing, they're our big brothers.
Sure.
They've pulled the plug on funding the same
That's
organisation.
right.
So should the New Zealand government.
Yes, I agree with you completely, and certainly your concerns are all valid, and I think that if the people of New Zealand and if the government in New Zealand was aware of how these funds were being used and the impropriety with which these various foundations were set up, I think it might raise more awareness. Now, you've spoken about difficulty in getting this out in the mainstream press. I was with Hugh Stedman yesterday going around downtown Wellington here to some various outlets. We spoke to some people at scoop.nz, and they were very receptive to what we were saying, but at the more mainstream news agencies like Dominion Press, for example.
The Dominion Post, yeah.
Post, sorry, yeah. They did not want to hear what we had to say at all. They were very, very much in line with things like the New York Times, the Washington Post, having just a positive image about everything the Clintons do, irrespective of the fact that charities in the United States are not allowed to promote the sale of pharmaceutical drugs, even if theoretically it would be helping someone. They didn't want to hear about the fact that Ramboxi, the Indian pharmaceutical company that provided these HIV and AIDS drugs, was embattled in all kinds of controversy, including faulty testing, faulty information about the efficacy of these drugs and actually fighting HIV/AIDS. So there's a whole host of issues. And again, I think the people of New Zealand need to hear your message and understand where their money is going. Well,
I mean, we work in quite a different context down here. We don't have a sort of left and right media in New Zealand, simply because of the historically because of our size.
Right.
You know, so we are sort of battling the mainstream newspaper press, particularly, and the main broadcasters are generally pretty centre left in terms of leaning. Which is why sort of we've been pleasantly surprised with the extent of the popularity of this particular campaign. We've sort of focused less on the specific allegations in relation to the various Clinton organisations, and sort of taken the more sort of principled approach that it should be about, you know, as I covered earlier, about just delivering aid. But it has concerned us the extent to which our own government seems to lack an understanding of some of the basic mechanics of the relationship between the Clinton Foundation and, in this case, the Clinton Health Initiative. Because we've been told now by in official responses to our, we call it the Official Information Act, I think you'd call Freedom of Information type request. And we're constantly told, well, no, CHI, or Clinton Health Initiative, is a legally separate organisation, and they assert boldly that it's got nothing to do with the Clinton Foundation, it simply shares a name. Well, we've had advice on this, and we've looked very carefully at the founding documents and the tax returns of the Clinton Health Initiative.
In the US or here?
In the US.
Yes.
In the US. Don't have a present here in the US, because it's all available online.
Right.
And actually, the Clinton Foundation appoint the directors of the Clinton Health Access Initiative.
Correct.
Now, when you're a not-for-profit, appointing directors is control. That is the definition of a subsidiary.
Correct.
And so we're constantly challenging our Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials here and the Minister on this. And they simply keep asserting, both publicly and in correspondence to us, that no, they're legally separate. That is just not right. And we sort of more focusing on that, because if that's the case, if ministers have made a decision or officials have made a decision to fund this organisation on the basis of assertions from these organisations that they are
false
separate.
pretenses.
Exactly. And so we're going to keep running hard on this campaign, because the government either is misleading the public, or they have been misled and have a totally incorrect understanding.
Correct.
So, I mean, we're sort of looking more into the detail there, because even if, and as I say, we're not taking a position, the organisations are squeaky clean, it is very clear that countries around the world were giving to these organisations for purposes of access or diplomatic reasons or soft power reasons. And our view is that is not what aid money is for.
Absolutely, and you're referring to what's called pay for play in the United States, and this, when Hillary was the Secretary of State and looking like she was going to become the president, there was a lot of financial contribution in countries around the world, and that's, as you pointed out, in Australia been cut off, and various countries, including France and Sweden and other countries, are looking into this right now.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit. It's probably a little bit cute. It might be that, because New Zealand we're very lucky that we have a very non-corrupt government, where we're pretty straight up. But I think in comparison to, say, Australia, where once Ms Clinton lost the race for presidency, all the countries pulled out. And New Zealand is sort of here saying, oh, well, no, we were funding it for legitimate reasons, so we can't possibly pull out, sort of thing. That's our impression of it.
Well, it's a valid point. I mean, there is possibly some saving face, and not for the wrong reasons. I'm saying, as you said, I think honest people presume that others will be honest, and they are helping. They want to help. So again, I think it's important that we help spread this message so that people know the truth. And certainly if anything that I'm saying is wrong, or if we're incorrect, we'll learn that and be corrected. But I do believe that countries like New Zealand are, for lack of a better word, preyed upon by the Clinton Foundation, because it creates this illusion of consent. It's like, hey, New Zealand's doing it, everything's cool. And as you said, the government is led to believe. I'm not presuming that anyone in the New Zealand government is perpetrating a fraud. I tend to agree with you that they've been misled themselves, or at least it seems that way. So sharing this information and getting the word out and allowing people to look into these things themselves is very important, because you spoke about the directors being appointed of the Clinton Health Access Initiative or the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative or any of these various subsidiaries. One really important thing is that the Clinton Foundation itself, which it was never legally set up. It's supposed to be the William J. Clinton Foundation. And its only legally established purpose as a nonprofit organization is the establishment of a presidential library in Arkansas. All of these other things that they're doing, no matter how nice they are, I mean, you could be, giving food to starving babies, and that's lovely. But in order to be a tax-exempt charity, you need to be properly registered in the United States and in all these countries around the world. You can't just decide we're going to do something nice and collect money and not properly account for it and go and do it.
Yeah, when we first launched this campaign in January last year, some of our staff and I went down onto the street here in Wellington, and we carried a tin with the Clinton Foundation. It's just sitting over there with the Clinton Foundation on it. And we went round members of the public and said, would you be willing to donate to the Clinton Foundation? And it probably won't surprise you that people said, some pretty aggressively, no, they wouldn't.
Oh, really?
And then, of course, how do you feel about your tax money going into this? And, the common thing was, well, one obvious thing is charity often starts at home, but even accepting that actually foreign aid is a very good thing. Yeah. That this isn't the best way to achieve it, because even if the Clinton Foundation does a lot of good, sure, there are thousands of equally good causes that are not tied into a political sort of
course,
I think accurately described as a dual purpose organisation. an organisation that has a charitable purpose and does charitable work, but also there is a political purpose to further
Right.
the ambitions or interests of a group of people. And we just think that's not appropriate for taxpayers' dollars.
Right. Now, there's been some reporting just over the past couple days that there was some secretive meeting between Hillary Clinton and government officials here in New Zealand. I think we might be having a little bit of network performance issues here. Let me just see what's going on. Have you heard any reporting in that regard?
No, I'm not aware of that. I know that Ms. Clinton met our Prime Minister, but no, that's probably out of our wheelhouse. We got.
It's interesting. We had very, very high performance readings when I set this up, but it seems like our video has frozen. So we're doing a radio broadcast at this time, but that's okay. That's okay. So where do you see the... no, we've been completely cut off there.
Are you
Let's
using
continue.
our Wi-Fi? You on our?
I am, yes.
That's very odd.
It's very high speed. You guys have
Yeah.
about 60 megabits per second in Wi-Fi. I wonder if the Five Eyes aren't... oh wait, perhaps it's coming back. Let's see. Let's give it a second. I don't know. I've had substantial internet problems here in New Zealand that it's very unusual to me. Yeah. Well, boy, I would hate to cut this short. There's drips and drabs of video coming in here, so let's just continue for a little bit. And I know you're quite busy, but where do you see the Taxpayers Union going with this campaign next?
Well, firstly, we're going to deliver this petition to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we're going to ensure they're not ignored. We're going to be printing out those various emails and letters from New Zealanders to the Minister of Foreign Affairs or Deputy Prime Minister, asking this funding to be cut. I think the next thing is if we do repeat I mentioned earlier that we went down to the street with the tin.
Yes.
And said, will you be willing to? I think we might be doing that at Parliament. I think that would be the next appropriate.
Now, you're not
step,
actually receiving money from people. It's just
no, we
a
didn't
survey.
get any. We didn't have that problem. We
I'm
had to send any
surprised.
away. But the point is this:
Okay, here we're back.
if the government's going to donate to a charity,
Yes.
it ought to be one where there is universal or close to universal acceptance across New Zealand taxpayers that this is a good cause.
Yes.
And the Clinton Foundation is far from that. And we'll see if members of Parliament are not willing to contribute their own money
Right.
to the Clinton Foundation offshoots, why on earth should they be allowing taxpayers' money to be used for the same?
Well, they're sort of forcing it, aren't they? It's more than allowing. You don't have a choice. The money is just
Precisely.
going there.
Yeah.
Now, were you surprised when John Key resigned so abruptly after Mrs. Clinton failed to win the presidency?
No, I don't think I don't think there's a connection there.
You don't?
There are some people online that speculate that, but no, I don't think for a moment it had anything to do.
They certainly had a very cozy relationship, didn't they?
Yeah, but similarly, John Key did with President Obama. I think that for personal reasons that John Key moved on, and that's
Right.
okay.
Do you feel that in general, I mean, John Key aside, do you feel that New Zealand has, or rather that the United States has a little bit too much influence over New Zealand in any regard?
No, I don't. There is quite a for your listeners and watchers at home. So New Zealand had quite a tense relationship with the US because of our anti-nuclear policy.
Yes.
In the late 1980s. We had
Yes.
a Labour government that was quite a radical, despite being a party of the centre-left, because of horrendous financial crises. We had sort of the Reagan or Thatcher era sort of happened very quickly,
Right.
ushered through in New Zealand under a centre-left government because of necessity. And one of the ways, or the particular way, sort of the centre-left party stayed together was this this anti-nuclear or nuclear-free policy, and
Right.
that sort of brought everyone together. And that buttressed very directly with the traditional ally, the US, because the American government refused to admit or deny whether ships they wanted to send here were nuclear armed. And so there was just this sort of, it's sort of a...
I bet you they might have been.
It's a quite a significant moment, or a significant few years in terms of our our relationship with our traditional allies. We're still a member of what's called Five Eyes, which is, and I think both to credit Helen Clark, who was our centre-left Prime Minister up until 2008, and then John Key, who we just mentioned, who resigned about 2 years ago, really worked hard on rebuilding that traditional
diplomatic relationship
yeah,
there. And obviously,
with the US.
New Zealand's participation in the Five Eyes is central to that diplomatic relationship. Do you feel that the law enforcement raid at Kim.com's mansion was complicit with the directions of the Five Eyes in the United States? Seemed like a heavy-handed response to someone that was wanted for copyright infringement.
I don't have a view on it, and I need to disclose that for very briefly, for a few days, I acted for Kim.com as a lawyer prior to this.
Wow.
So I've got to be, I don't really want to go there.
Understood.
So
We won't touch it.
But it wasn't anything to do with those issues, but nevertheless, I wouldn't want to.
Interesting. Yeah, he's a figure that everybody is aware of here in
Well, I
New Zealand.
think it's fair to say after that particular incident, Kim.com has made public comments about me and our organisation that I don't think...
About you?
Yeah, well, the Kim.com represents he hitched his cart to quite a far left campaign vehicle and tried to create a political party.
The Internet Party.
Yeah, the Internet Party, which I suspect was a way to... which was widely interpreted as a way to avoid being extradited back to the US if he was leader of a political party. It didn't go anywhere because he didn't get into Parliament. I think they failed to even get 1% of the party vote, of the proportional vote.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's sort of Kim.com's sort of not as relevant he's not in the media nearly as much anymore.
Sure.
And that's still working, and fortunately taking a very long time to get through the courts in terms of whether he gets extradited back to the US.
And setting him aside as an individual, the general concept of intelligence agencies and law enforcement infringing on individuals' rights is a big focus of what I look into on Crowdsource the Truth. And there is an individual here in New Zealand living just outside of Christchurch named Harmon Wilfred. I don't imagine you've heard of him, have you?
No.
Well, Harmon is a U.S. Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen who became a CIA contractor and discovered extensive financial crimes and has revealed links to the Clinton Foundation. He was dealing in these bearer bonds and financial instruments that he felt were tied to things like Iran-Contra and the funding of this whole black ops bank that started the same year as the Clinton Foundation. And 20 years ago, Gregory Craig, who was Bill Clinton's lawyer at the time while Bill Clinton was president, told Mr. Wilfred that if he didn't drop this matter and make peace with the U.S. government, he would never see his children again. And that promise has held for 20 years. So here we've got a stateless individual, one of only two in all of New Zealand, and America's first political refugee who is being denied New Zealand citizenship by INZ, and his wife, who's a Canadian citizen, has been barred from entering New Zealand. So again, it seems...
It's very unusual for not to let Canadians in.
It's very unusual, and there seems to be heavy influence from the Five Eyes, and particularly the CIA, which is why I asked about the notion of the United States having influence over law enforcement, et cetera, in New Zealand. And again, I'm just going around to Auckland, to Wellington, to Christchurch to try to meet with people like yourself who are involved in these activism programs, basically, and who are aware, because so few people are aware. I believe there's a major psychological component to what the Clintons do, and you've described it in what you said. The members of the New Zealand government, I'm sure, are well-meaning, who want to give charitable contributions to the needy people around the world, and this is something that is preyed upon, and then that influence is there. Hey.
Well, I will comment just generally on spying and the like, because you've touched a little bit on that, and that was certainly one of the things that the Internet Party and the far left of politics, who was the American whistleblower?
Snowden?
Yeah, Snowden was called in and got involved, and sort of a big theatre, it was an expose that
Right.
turned into nothing. But it's a domination of the far left of New Zealand politics, the idea of internet security and privacy and the like, and that deeply concerns me. It's not an issue that Taxpayers Union would take up. It's not in our wheelhouse, but it is something as a lawyer I'm quite concerned about, and as a classical liberal,
And as a citizen.
yeah, absolutely. So that we are generally on the centre right. We have I mentioned earlier, this radical idea that you spend your money better than politicians.
Right.
We are inherently concerned or a bit suspicious about the power of the state, and yet when it comes to information, the ability of the government to peer over your shoulder, open your letters, etc. In a digital context, open
Sure.
your letters, read your messages. That is now, at least here, a concern of the far left of politics, and the conservative side or the libertarian side have totally given up on that, and that greatly concerns me, because what we're allowing to happen is for privacy law and human rights around privacy to be dominated by interactions between private parties. See, for example, in the US, you've had an enormous brouhaha over Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, yep, okay, and there's legitimate concerns around that. But that, at least in New Zealand, is crowding out what I think is a much greater concern, which is the relationship between us and the state in terms of the state's
The individual
involvement.
and the state.
Yeah, individual and the state.
Right.
Because one is voluntary, one is not. You're not required to have a Facebook account.
Right.
If you do not want to have, the free services provided by Facebook in exchange for being able to sell your data or mine your,
Right.
target advertising or whatever. But unfortunately, the you don't have that voluntary relationship with the government, and that is my equivalent in Britain that founded the Taxpayers Alliance. Subsequently founded a group called Big Brother Watch.
Interesting.
And it's a very, very good organisation over there. Originally founded around the Brits really have a lot of CCTV and the like.
Yes.
Around that, but around the personal privacy between vis-a-vis you and the state, and that's probably something that's that's really lacking here in New Zealand. And I do think that it is time that us on the centre right actually pull that argument back, because it is something that we should be concerned about as people that appreciate what big state, the evils of having a dominant state in society, rather than leaving it to the sort of the fringe, almost neo-Marxist type parties of the Greens, which in New Zealand this is supposedly our environmental party, but they're
Right.
our socialist party,
Right.
and the likes of Kim.com and his hangers-on in the Internet Party that again are very economically very left-wing, but just on this particular issue around internet security, they're very concerned about.
And it's my understanding that as part of this Five Eyes Alliance, there's a pretty extensive radar network that's been installed in New Zealand, and the analysis of that SIG-INT, the signal intelligence coming from that, goes directly to the United States, making the intelligence services of New Zealand very, very reliant on information coming from the United States. And again, I think it's important, even though this isn't an issue that would be directly in the wheelhouse of the Taxpayers Union, you're obviously advocates for the individuals, for the citizens of New Zealand, and I think that everything that we're talking about right here are issues that are just really coming to the fore now, that people are starting to understand.
Well, there's a difference there though, because as long as those facilities are not being used to spy on New Zealand citizens.
Well, we don't know.
And we have to take the assertions of, there's this debate over that. As far as I'm aware, those sorts of facilities are only used for spying on foreign citizens, and that is your first duty of government is to protect the realm and to protect from external threats. So I don't have any objection to that.
But I'm very glad that you just said that, because it points to another really important issue. I mean, again, I didn't know about the Five Eyes Alliance until the 2016 U.S. election and this whole issue of the British GCHQ conducting some sort of espionage operation on candidate Trump. And it creates this bizarre legal loophole where, sure, New Zealand government or New Zealand intelligence services can't spy on New Zealand citizens. But once we create this international relationship between these intelligence agencies, perhaps the U.S. has New Zealand spy on U.S. citizens, and in turn, U.S. intelligence agencies can spy on New Zealand
Yeah, well,
citizens.
the New Zealand government's denied that is the case.
Okay.
But certainly, I think we should be ever vigilant to that particular concern. I mean, from a New Zealand perspective, being the smallest partner in Five Eyes, we do pretty well out of it.
Right.
It probably means that, and historically, since the Second World War, we've probably done quite well out of our security alliances, because being the small partner at the bottom of the world, unlike Australia, we don't have very real. We don't. When Darwin was bombed in the Second World War, we've never had experienced anything like that.
Right.
So we're not as conscious as a society of external threats, but we're probably subsidised by our Five Eyes partners, or we benefit
Right.
more. Our percentage of spending on defence is a lot lower than Australia, and a heck of a lot lower than the US in terms of a percentage of GDP. So we probably do pretty well. There are certainly parts of on the spectrum of New Zealand politics. There are some that are very much against the Five Eyes network, but then you've got to look at, well, what are your alternatives?
Right.
It's we have already hitched to a large degree our economic cart to China, and it's a big problem that New Zealand has, simply because of the nature of our economy. We've sort of we're a Western nation, but with a sort of agricultural based economy, which is a bit unusual. Our biggest trading partners, one of the largest, is China and Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So we've hitched our economic card up to Asia, but our security and our cultural ties are actually with the Anglosphere.
Right.
And so that does cause, in a geopolitical environment, a little bit of conflict, because of course we've always got the risk of, where Australia is big enough, if they annoy China, they've got a bit more power. We don't.
Right.
We're simply a cork on the ocean.
Yeah, certainly New Zealand is in a very unique position in the world for a variety of reasons, the remote nature of it, the size, etc. So these are interesting points that you're bringing up. So Jordan, where can people go to sign this petition and learn more about the Taxpayers Union?
Taxpayers.org.nz. Or the petition is on our homepage, or it's /Clinton_petition.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you sign that, it'll take you through, if you want to take the next step and write to our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters. We've provided a tool there, and in the next few weeks we're going to be printing all those thousands of emails out and wandering them just down the road to Parliament and delivering them to Mr. Peters' office.
Yes, we're in close proximity to the beehive right here, aren't we?
We are. We'd like to keep them on a short leash.
You poke the beehive. So, and now, in addition to the support that you've been receiving in the past few days, have you noticed any increase in resistance? I overheard earlier you were talking about what would possibly be categorized as online trolling. Have you seen any of that happening?
Yeah, we're going to get that, and particularly the nature of this issue, that our enemies on the centre left in New Zealand will naturally try to frame us as being anti-aid or anti-helping poor people.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally you get the sort of snide remarks on left-wing media. There was an interview on the public broadcaster Radio New Zealand a few days ago where someone made, well, they don't care about poor people. And nothing could be further from the truth. We're simply saying this is about helping poor people around the world. That's what the aid budget is for.
Right.
It should be going solely for that purpose, not being diverted to organisations with dual purposes.
And do you feel that that resistance is organic and coming from concerned people who are maybe misinformed, or would it be feeling like it's possibly coming from an organization along the lines of Media Matters that is specifically doing a disinformation campaign to disrupt your activities?
We largely ignore it. We're here to, this is just one of our many campaigns. There is obviously members of our organisation that care pretty deeply about this, and we will represent their interests and do so unashamedly, because we are very confident that we're on the side of virtue here. We're not saying that the money that we just simply saying the money should be going to where it should be going, or the tag that is being put on it. So if people want to have a go, that's the
nature of the game, right?
That's their right. That's fine. But if you don't want to sign the petition, unlike New Zealand taxpayers that are being forced to pay to the Clinton Health Initiative, we're not going to make you.
Right. And do international signatures help you at all, or it's got to be New Zealand taxpayers?
No, we don't mind if you support it, but I think clearly when we provide the details to the government, I think that New Zealand taxpayers is a lot more. It's a lot more persuasive,
right.
And that's our audience.
Of course. Of course.
It's a pretty low percentage of people on our databases that are based overseas, but naturally, if your viewers and listeners are interested in the cause, by all means, add your name at taxpayers.org.nz.
And we want to get that support closer to your overall base of 35,000. How many signatures do you think you need to really sway them?
I'd like to get to 10.
10,000.
Which I think is possible. I mean, we'll keep chipping away at this. If the government doesn't see sense this year, we'll have another go next year, and I think we'll get there in the end. We'll be very disappointed if they manage to funnel the full $5.5 million into the organisation, because our main tool is sunlight,
right.
And simply shining the light on how the government spends our money is the best disinfectant in terms of that quality of decisions. And every time we called the minister's office the other day to check that the emails were coming through, and the tone of the receptionist and the Deputy Prime Minister's office suggests that the message was being received. Very good. Very much so. We'll just keep on. In politics, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Right.
We just have to make sure it keeps on squeaking.
Absolutely. Well, Jordan, thank you very much for meeting with me. I wish you the best of luck in your campaign, and I hope we'll be in contact in the future.
Very good.
Thank you.